Hello, gang. Tattooed Biker here with you, and tonight I have 3 real Bigfoot encounter stories and reports. First off, a father and son duck hunting when they observe a black, hairy monster with red eyes. And then, a West Yorkshire resident is walking their dog and observe a massive, upright, hairy creature. And lastly, a Wisconsin teen encounters an unknown hairy biped while retrieving the mail. Now you don't want to miss this one, so hurry up. Grab your boots and let's ride to Bigfoot country. Number 1. Hey TB, anyone who doesn't think that the hairy hominid creatures exist is in for a huge shock if they ever spend some time out in the wilderness. I was duck hunting with my father here in Louisiana many years ago, and I saw one watching us. My father was paddling around, putting out decoys, and I was in my blind, and that's when I saw what looked like a huge, black, hairy blob in the prairie grass. As my father set out the last decoy, he turned his attention back towards the blind. I could see 2 red eyes peering from the black hairy blob. It then stood up and looked at me, and then turned and walked back into the cypress trees. This thing was absolutely huge. It looked like the tallest linebacker I've ever seen, with huge shoulders, no neck, a slim waist, and huge thighs. The wind was blowing from behind me, so we didn't smell it, and it was gone fairly quickly. Back then, no one talked about Sasquatch or Bigfoot or anything like that. I had no idea what it was I saw. After countless nightmares, my mom asked me why all of a sudden I was having these nightmares. I told her what happened that morning. She told me about a conversation that she had overheard between her parents, where my grandfather had a run-in with one, stealing animals out of his traps. A few years later, after football practice, she took me to the drive-in theater and we saw the legend of Boggy Creek. That was the first time that I knew exactly what I saw that morning. Since then, I've had an addiction to having to read and research everything on the subject, including doing some of my own research out in those woods. Anyway, peace out and stay safe, brother. Signed, Wendell. Number 2. Dear Biker, it's taken me a long time to come forward with what happened to me that day, but I feel like I'm ready to tell it all. This happened years ago in the month of October, back in 1998. My family and I lived in a rural area of West Yorkshire in a village called Birmingham. It's a countryside area with lots of farms, a quarry, some rivers and streams. I like to walk my dog around the lanes and tracks as it was a way for me to wind down and get some fresh air. I had finished work on that particular evening, and I'm out walking with my dog down a long farm track, a route that we would often take. It was early evening, so it was around 8 p.m., and it had just gotten dark. Me and the dog are just walking along, and I let the dog off the lead so he could have a run, as we were about a half mile up this single farm track, and there were no animals or people around, so I let him have a sniff around. As I walked the dog, he was just doing his own thing, and it was quiet, no sign of anyone around. I was enjoying the walk, and there are hedges on both sides of the track the whole way, so it's pretty hard to see clearly into the fields, and there are some woods to one side of me. As we walked even further along the track, the dog suddenly stops. He froze and looked up the track in the direction that we were heading. He must be aware of something up there, as he starts growling and acting all strange. His hackles are up and he growls continuously. At that point, I'm thinking it must be a fox, which is the way he had acted before if we came across one. So I'm looking at the track, trying to see the fox, and well, I can't see anything. No fox, no cat, or any other animal. I can see how worked up he is, as now he's going mad and starts barking loudly. I had carried on walking by, so at this point, he was a short ways behind me. So I turned to the dog to try and calm him down, but he just won't stop. If anything, he's getting even worse. Something had really spooked him, so I turned to look up the track, and I couldn't believe my eyes. Just standing there, looking at us, was this huge thing. An absolutely massive creature stood there looking back in our direction. It must have walked between 8 to 9 footsteps out onto the field track before I'd seen it, and now I could see it clearly, and it can see us. At this point, I was in complete shock about what I was seeing. I just kept thinking, it can't be real. I honestly don't think my brain could process what I was looking at, because standing there on the field track was a huge creature of some kind. It was massively built and was about 5 feet wide across the shoulders and about 8 feet tall. I couldn't make out any facial features as the face was in shadow, but I could make out that it was covered in hair. It was standing about 30 meters from me, so I could see it clearly, but I couldn't make out any features, even from that distance. It made no sound whatsoever, and I never smelled or heard anything. To my disbelief at that moment, the dog runs straight towards it. The dog's barking as he runs in its direction, but the dog stopped about 15 meters away from this thing. He was clearly scared and just didn't know how to react. He had completely forgotten about me, and that's a first for my dog. Usually, he would put my needs first, and maybe that was what he was doing, as he was by now in between me and this creature, but I could tell I was the last thing on his mind at that point. The dog barks a few more times, then he turns and runs straight past me and back up the farm track to the safety to the way we came in. No doubt now you can imagine how stunned I was. The whole incident lasted only a few seconds, and I just stood there paralyzed and trying to process what I'd just seen. I must have been in shock because of what I did next. I did without conscious thought, and I can't explain why I did it, but as I stood there, looking at this creature, I nodded my head quickly and said, "All right," to it. I know that's crazy, but that's what I did. And then I just calmly turned around and started walking back down the field track after my dog, the whole time listening for this creature coming behind me. I was completely shitting myself. I think I acted without thinking, as I never looked back up that track until I got to the dog, and then I couldn't see anything in the field anymore when I did. Now, I didn't report this for years and years until other people came forward in secret and started to share their accounts online with each other. I had no idea what a Bigfoot was back then. Now, years on from seeing them online, I can say without a doubt it looked like it was an exact match. I've spoken with other witnesses on numerous occasions, and I do let them know at least one other person has come forward with the same story. Thanks for letting me share, signed, Byron. A quick narrator's note here. I have received one other direct report, and I've read about a few other reported sightings in this area over the years. Is there really a Bigfoot roaming West Yorkshire? I'll be sure and keep you posted of any more sightings. Number 3. Hey, Tattooed. I was chased by some kind of creature outside my childhood home. This was rural Wisconsin, and I was 16 at the time. Up until that day, I had zero fear of the woods. In fact, I spent most of my time out there, exploring, and feared nothing. My parents had a lousy marriage, and they fought a lot, and I just felt more at home outside than in the house. On hot nights, I'd take a sleeping bag and sleep on the roof of an old shack on our property. I would see bears, wolves, and well, they were always more afraid of me than I was of them. I didn't believe in ghosts, Bigfoot, demons, or even God at the time. I only got lost out there once when dark fell sooner than I expected. That time I stayed calm, found the North Star, and knew that if I continued south, I'd eventually come across the old railroad tracks near my home. Even the thought of spending the night out there didn't bother me, and the thought of my mom's rage when I didn't come home did. So it was summer, and I had just turned 16. My mom had left my father, and he worked all the time. My sister was out living on her own, and once school was out, it was me, my cat, and this is before the internet or smartphones. We lived on a dead-end dirt road, and around noon I took my usual stroll down the long driveway to check the mail. My cat, well, he followed me everywhere, and I actually kind of relied on him to give me a heads up if there was a bear or something close by. I sensed a bit of movement behind me as I stood at the mailbox, and it made me aware that there was something across the road in the trees, but there were these pesky deer everywhere. Then I heard a loud crash, like something was making its way through the brush. It's like every classic horror story. My brain had no capability for the thought of anything paranormal or spooky. I simply tucked the mail under my arm and headed into the woods to investigate. My cat followed close behind me. I got about 10 yards in when I noticed something I hadn't noticed before. There was no noise. Nothing. It was a beautiful June day, and there wasn't even a single bird singing. No insects. No leaves rustling. It was absolutely silent. At the same time I registered the silence, I get this eerie feeling that something was watching me. I stopped immediately and started scanning the woods for deer. Hunters know what I'm talking about when I say that you look for the shape of a deer instead of trying to pinpoint them by color. And that's when I spotted it. 2 huge, brown, furry legs. The top of it was concealed by tree branches. My cat hissed, and I looked down, and he was completely poofed out with his back arched, looking at the same thing that I was. I looked back up, and then the legs moved. Not like a deer, like a human. Everything happened at once after that. I dropped the mail, grabbed my cat by the scruff, and I ran for it. Whatever was out there with me was running after me, and I've never run so fast in my life. I tore up the driveway, into the house, locked the door behind me, and grabbed the phone. I called my next-door neighbor, who was the ex-chief of police, and he came over immediately with his pistol. He checked the spot I was in and found nothing. I was so hysterical, I was completely in tears. He stayed with me until I was able to reach my mom and have her come home and get me. Of course, they all thought I was completely high or delusional, but I know exactly what I saw and what I felt. It was broad daylight, and I haven't felt safe in those woods again, and I stopped sleeping outside. Thanks, Biker. Signed, Jared. And there it is. All the true Bigfoot encounter reports that I have for you tonight. So what'd you think about these encounters? Please, though, when you're commenting, keep it respectful to the witnesses. And if you have an unexplained experience that you'd like to share, just send it to the email address in the description and, well, your story may just wind up in a future video. Anyways, thanks for riding with me tonight. I really appreciate it. And until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, stay safe, and I'll be seeing you on down the road a ways. Biker, out.